Hello and welcome to the Godless Family Webcast. I'm your host, Aubrey Adrianson, and with me tonight is my co-host, Amanda Hayes. Say hello, Amanda.
Hello.
And tonight we're going to be talking about stories from the New Testament, and we're going to concentrate on stories that you'll see and often see in a children's Bible. And one of the main differences between the Old Testament and the New Testament that I really wanted to talk about tonight, and Amanda, we didn't talk about this beforehand, but I find it really interesting that the Old Testament is all about God, and the New Testament is all about Jesus. And the reason why I find that interesting is because there's a lot of talk between the difference between the Old Testament God and the New Testament God, and that Jesus kind of changed Old Scripture and kind of changed God. In the New Testament, and so I find that interesting that there's really not a lot of mention of God, or he's really not even doing anything in the New Testament. It's all the angels and Jesus doing stuff. So I just wanted to bring that up. So we won't really be talking about God today. We'll be talking about Jesus. And the first story that we want to talk about is the birth of Jesus. And Amanda's going to read from the children's Bible that she has. Are you ready?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Jesus. Also, if you want to follow along, it's just at BibleForChildren.org. It's free to everybody. It's as I said before, it's a real treat. Fun for the whole family. All right. The birth of Jesus. You want me to just read it?
Yeah.
You want me to read it? All right. Long ago, God sent the angel Gabriel to a sweet young Jewish maiden named Mary. He told her, "You will have a son, and call his name Jesus. He will be called the Son of the Highest. He will reign forever." "How can this be?" the amazed girl asked. "I have not been with any man." The angel told Mary the child would come from God. There would not be a human father. The angel then told Mary that her cousin Elizabeth was having a baby in her old age. This was a miracle too. Soon after, Mary visited Elizabeth. They praised God together. Mary was engaged to marry a man named Joseph. Joseph was sad when he learned Mary was expecting a baby. He thought some other man was the father. In a dream, God's angel told Joseph that this child was God's son. Joseph was to help Mary look after Jesus. Joseph trusted and obeyed God. He also obeyed his country's laws. Because of a new law, he and Mary left for their hometown, Bethlehem, to pay their taxes. Mary was ready to have her baby, but Joseph could not find a room anywhere. All the inns were full. Joseph finally found a stable. There, baby Jesus was born. His mother laid him in a manger, a place where the animals' food was usually put. Nearby, shepherds guarded their sleeping flocks. God's angels appeared and told them the wonderful news. "There is born to you this day in the city of David a Savior who is Christ the Lord. You will find the baby lying in a manger." Suddenly, many more bright angels appeared, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men." The shepherds hurried to the stable. After seeing the baby, they told everyone they met what the angels had said about Jesus. 40 days later, Joseph and Mary brought Jesus to the temple in Jerusalem. There was a man named Simeon. Did you say Simeon?
I don't have it in front of me.
Simeon, I'm just guessing Simeon, praised God for the baby, while the old Anna, another servant of the Lord, gave thanks. Both knew Jesus was God's son, the promised Savior. Joseph sacrificed 2 birds. This was the offering God's law said poor people should bring when they presented a newborn child to the Lord. Sometime later, a special star led wise men from an eastern country to Jerusalem. "Where is he who is born King of the Jews?" they asked. "We want to worship him." King Herod heard about the wise men. Troubled, he asked them to tell him when they found Jesus. "I want to worship him too," Herod said, but he was lying. Herod wanted to kill Jesus. The star led the wise men to the exact house where Mary and Joseph lived with the young child. Kneeling in worship, the travelers gave Jesus rich gifts of gold and perfume. God warned the wise men to return home secretly. Herod was furious. Determined to destroy Jesus, the wicked ruler killed all boy babies in Bethlehem. But Herod could not harm God's son. Warned in a dream, Joseph took Mary and Jesus to safety in Egypt. When Herod died, Joseph brought Mary and Jesus back from Egypt. They lived in the little town of Nazareth near the Sea of Galilee. The end.
All right. So one thing I find interesting about that story is when I was taught that story, the Magi were there on the night he was born. So there's some, I don't know, creative license when the story gets retold, because you see the plays where the different plays that schools put on where Jesus is born, and the Magi show up with the gifts.
The wise men?
Yeah, the wise men in the
okay.
manger. They're in the manger. So that's interesting that they actually told it accurately in the children's Bible.
Is that's accurate? That they actually weren't there? Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were there later.
Oh.
After that Jesus was probably, according to the website I'm looking at, Jesus was probably a toddler by the time the three wise men made their way to Jerusalem.
Interesting. Huh.
So, so some things about this story that I find interesting that Christians, especially like really conservative Christians, would teach their children is, first of all, that Mary is a virgin, because conservative Christians are just terrified of sex, terrified of talking about sex. So I find it interesting that you would, that you would start with this, but very often they do, because you see all the cute, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds doing the Jesus Christmas story at school or in churches. And I kind of wonder how they explain that.
The idea of the Virgin Mary?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have no idea. I would imagine it's kind of a, I don't know, don't ask, don't tell. I mean, I could just see them kind of brushing it off, like, we're not going to talk about it right now, or don't worry about it, or I don't know.
She's just a virgin, that's all you need to know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I don't know if they would actually use, like, the exact verbiage, or just say that she was pure and she was never with a man, whatever that entails. I don't know. It's weird.
And then, of course, they gloss over, and maybe it's not in the Bible at all, because we didn't bring up the King James version this time. We felt like that would be too long, and too boring to read the King James version. But Joseph in that time, and even in modern day Arab countries where Sharia law is basically the law, you can kill a woman for being pregnant out of wedlock. It would be Joseph's right to have her stoned to death, and they do talk about that in the version that I pulled up here. And that's linked to on our website as well if anyone wants to go to that link. And that he chose not to because an angel came to him and said, that's God's child.
Oh, right.
And so I read
I know you want to kill her, and I can understand the sentiment, but please don't.
Don't kill her, dude. Whatever you do, don't kill her.
I love it.
It just a lot of these stories in the New Testament crack me up, because I keep thinking, man, what kind of drugs were these people on? Because they saw a lot of angels and a lot of crazy shit.
Yep. This is true.
And anyway, that's not very family friendly. Sorry.
Really quick, I know we both are a little out of it today, so I just realized neither one of us has our lower third up with any of
Oh,
our generation. So sorry about that, guys. I'm putting that up right now.
okay. I'll get mine up in a little bit. Yeah, we are we are both totally out of it right now.
Yeah.
As you can see, I am in the basement, in the dungeon of the basement, and I have the light off because it's like this big blurring fluorescent light, and I like if it was on, I would actually be glowing white right now. So, but anyway, so back to the birth of Jesus. Um, so that was the whole virgin birth thing. I kind of just wonder how, especially like I said, really conservative Christian parents are really going into this with their children, especially ones that don't even want to talk about sex, that are actually selling the stork rings, the baby story to children, how they're handling that. And I honestly I don't know, because I was raised in a pretty liberal and progressive home. So if anyone's listening and wants to kind of share any experiences they have with that, I'd love to, read your comments and read them on air. Oh, I lost Amanda. Okay. um, so those are my criticisms with the birth of Jesus. Is, how are they explaining this virgin birth? What's happening with the angels? And also, I'll get into this more later when we talk about the crucifixion. But virgin birth, the miraculous virgin birth, shows up in other stories and other religions. So it's not unique to Christianity. And yay, Amanda's back.
Oh my gosh. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because first of all, it kicked me off the call and said, like, this call is ended. Try again later. And then when I got back on, it's like, your microphone's not working, so I don't know what's happening. I can't do this again. Not this time.
Oh my gosh.
Ah.
So anything you wanted to add to this story? Any criticisms? Anything you want to, or actually, anything that you would say to your children?
As far as teaching them about the birth of Jesus?
Yes.
Well, I wish I was a little more prepared for this. I haven't really had any talks as far as my kids about sex or anything, so I wouldn't have to discuss the virgin idea unless one of them specifically asked me. Just looking over this again, because nothing. I mean, it's all pretty ridiculous. None of it really stands out as something.
I think my approach would be to just compare it to other virgin birth stories.
Mm-hmm.
Next week we're going to talk about Hindu myths, and one Hindu myth that we will definitely touch upon. I believe it's Krishna was born of a virgin, and actually the life of Krishna and the life of Jesus are very similar. So we'll be comparing those two mythical figures, next week. So that would be my approach. Like, okay, well, how many virgin births can there possibly be?
It's a pretty common theme.
Yeah, it seems to happen a lot in 2,000, 3,000 years ago. So I don't know
right.
what was in the water back then. And then of course, I think I would even go as far as to say, if Mary were a real person, knowing the consequences for having sex out of marriage in that time, what's the chances that she was lying?
Yeah.
And Joseph too, and just oh crap, we had sex before we got married. Now we're pregnant. We gotta come up with something so we don't get in trouble. I mean, what I see that as something that would be possible. That if I were facing death, I would certainly be lying.
Oh, yeah.
where my baby came from.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
I think about that all the time. That's like one of, if it actually did happen historically, that's like one of the biggest cover-ups in history is like, no, 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 no. This is God's child. Like,
exactly.
yeah,
So
that's,
those would be the approaches that I think I would take. And currently, the only thing I've done is compared the Jesus story to other stories, other religious stories or mythical stories.
hmm
So that my children have the comparison, but I haven't really gone into the deep criticism like, okay, was she really visited by angels? Was she making this up to escape death? I haven't done that yet, but I think when they get older, it's something I might do.
yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay, so no questions so far, just comments. Adam says, "I like an angel." That's my husband, and he's being sweet right now. And he's not in trouble either. Just in case anyone wants to know, he's just being sweet. So the next one that we wanted to talk about was Jesus feeding 5,000 people.
Yes, 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 yes. This is, let's find it.
And if anyone wants to follow along, it's in Matthew 14, Mark 6, Luke 9, and John 6.
Yes, it's found in a couple of places. All right, so from the children's version, Jesus feeds 5,000 people. Okay, oh, this is a long one. All right. Many religious leaders called Pharisees told lies about Jesus. Some even tried to kill him. They did not believe he was really God's son. Maybe they were onto something, you know? Maybe they were like, hey, this is ridiculous. Stop these excuses. They did not accept him even though he did miracles which proved he is God's son. One day, Jesus crossed the Sea of... Can you just tell me, is it Galilee or Galilee? I have no idea. I don't look up the pronunciation before I read this.
I never
So
do. I don't know.
I probably have people out there that are just like, oh, you ignorant jerk. All right, I'm going to say Galilee.
Let's go with it.
Okay. Perhaps he wanted a little break from the crowds which always gathered around him. But the crowds soon found him. They knew Jesus did great miracles. They wanted to be with him. Jesus led his disciples to a deserted mountain spot where he sat teaching. More and more people kept coming. Soon it was supper time. Everybody must have been hungry. Jesus looked at the crowd. Where shall we buy bread that these may eat? He asked Philip. There were no food stores around. What was Jesus planning to do? It would cost a fortune to feed this crowd, Philip answered Jesus. Jesus and his disciples did not have much money. Another disciple, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to Jesus, There is a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. But what are they among so many? Andrew didn't see how the little boy's lunch could feed very many people, even if the boy were willing to give his lunch to Jesus. Jesus said, Make the people sit down. So the men sat down, in number about 5,000. Wow, 5,000! That didn't even include the women and children who were there also. Next, Jesus took the loaves and fish.
Because why bother counting
I was
those
just going to
people?
say that. I didn't want to interrupt with it, but it's like the men
I couldn't help it. I had to say
and count. Don't worry about the
I'm not
women
gonna
folk
count
and the
those
children.
people.
It's just pointless. Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah, I'm glad you said something because I was like, whatever. Next, Jesus took the loaves and fish. The little boy must have trusted Jesus. He didn't know why Jesus wanted his lunch or what Jesus would do with it. He may have thought, if I give my lunch away, I can't eat, but he gave it to Jesus anyway. Then Jesus prayed. He gave thanks to God. For 5 loaves and 2 fish? Yes. Jesus said thank you to God and asked him to bless the food. After praying, Jesus broke the loaves and fishes and gave them to the disciples who shared them among the great crowd. That's when people saw the miracle Jesus did. Each person ate all he wanted, yet the loaves and fishes weren't used up. After everybody was fed, there was still a lot of bread and fish left over. Gather up the fragments so that nothing is lost, Jesus told the disciples. They filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves which were left over by those who had eaten. That day, Jesus fed over 5,000 people with a little boy's lunch. Another time, he fed over 4,000 people with 7 loaves and a few fish. When ordinary people saw these signs, they weren't angry like the Pharisees. Instead, they said, "This is truly the prophet who is to come into the world." They knew Jesus was the Savior whose coming was promised in God's holy word. The end.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I do. And they're just kind of preliminary thoughts, but I have noticed that as far as the Christian interpretation, there are some people who do take the miracles absolutely literally, and then you have more progressive Christians who have said that they think that that they're more of a metaphor. And so I'm interested to see exactly just where the divide is, because it says specifically that he performed these miracles, but a lot of the people are like, well, maybe he didn't. Maybe, metaphorically they were just trying to show you how awesome he is. So that always interests me.
Yeah, that is interesting, because metaphorically, how could you reinterpret this story? So if we're talking that Jesus performed this miracle, what is the metaphorical interpretation? So when I see stuff like this, and I hear the progressive interpretation, well, this is just a metaphor. Well, what is it a metaphor for? Did he feed the people or not? And if he didn't feed the people, well, what is it symbolizing to you? What does it mean to you? Because throughout the New Testament, especially during the time when Jesus is performing these miracles, and I wrote this in my notes, he's doing this to gain followers. It's just to get, I'm the Son of God, and if you don't believe me, I'm going to perform this miracle, and then you'll become my follower. And so that's, I wish we had a Christian on right now, because I'd ask that question. Well, what's the metaphorical interpretation? Sounds to me like he fed a bunch of people.
Well, one thing that I did find, which we talked about in the pre-show, is the biggest thing that people took from it was, and this is mentioned in the Bible a couple of other times, but Jesus being the bread of life, essentially, and saying that if you believe in him and you trust in his love and his word, you will never go hungry or thirst. Which we know is BS, because a lot of believers go hungry and thirst. So unless they're talking about another metaphor and not literally being hungry and thirsty, that's not true, because millions of people go hungry every single day who believe in God and who trust in God. Mm-hmm. So you can't explain that necessarily. There can't be any truth in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've heard conservative Christians say, well, those people that are hungry, they're doing something wrong. They believe in God, but they're not with God because for whatever reason. And I'd like, that, and then that, the next question to that is, how do you even know that?
Right.
Millions of Christians who worship God, give their money to the church, go to church, and are starving to death, somehow still aren't with God, but you are with your millions of dollars. That's a bunch of BS. And I've noticed that with because with the link that I posted on the website, after a lot of these stories are some of the lessons that Christians typically teach people, children, other followers. So what's the lesson to be learned with some of these stories? And I see a reoccurring theme that if you're with God, you'll be taken care of. If you're with God, you're going to be fed for this in this story. It's just really interesting because I kind of see all these stories, like I said before, as a way to gain followers. It's all about gaining followers, performing miracles so that Jesus is the Son of God. How do you know? Because he can perform miracles. And then his followers and his disciples, even though they're not rich, they're not hungry, they're well taken care of. And so you see the followers they're not hungry, they're well taken care of, they have a home, they have a family. Some of them have family anyway. they're also well taken care of. They have jobs. You think, well, I got to get with Jesus
Right.
if I want if I want these things. And during that time, there was, poverty was an issue just as much as it is now. Maybe even more so.
Well, and Jesus didn't I can't think of the word that I want, but he didn't endorse living beyond your means, like a lot of conservative Christians would endorse now. And he was very much in favor of helping the poor and helping people who are less fortunate and not flaunting your money and not crapping on people who don't have anything and telling them, like, hey, all you got to do is pull yourself up by your bootstraps and work hard and you can get the American dream. Like, that's what a lot of people are saying, when Jesus was nothing like that. He was completely the opposite. He did everything he could to, this is why he's performing these miracles. He's feeding the hungry and healing the sick, and yet a lot of modern day, like you said, primarily conservative Christians think that you shouldn't do that. People should take care of themselves. So it's certainly a contradiction from what's in their book, I think.
And but I also, I also think it's a real popular selling point, not only today, but even back then. If you take this example where 5,000 people, and then in the website here it says possibly 10,000, 20,000 if you include the women and children, were fed. And if hunger is an issue for you, then of course you're going to follow that guy around.
Right.
And, you praise God, okay, great. Can I have some bread?
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean,
of course. I view this a lot as just taking advantage of stupid people. I think about that with all religions, but these stories in particular, you're not really converting people. You're feeding them so that they will follow you, or you're scaring them or wowing them with some kind of miracle so that they will pay attention to you and follow you, which is the next story.
Yes. Real quick before we move on, I did want to mention we were talking about counting, and it said 5,000 men, and I kind of have a problem with that as well, because if they have this group of people, and with the women and children it could be anywhere from 15 to 20,000, it would be difficult for you to count out just the men in such a huge crowd and determine that it's about 5,000. I mean, you could maybe estimate the size of a crowd when they're all together and say, oh, it looks like it could be 15 to 20,000 people. But you can't look into a crowd of 15 to 20,000 people and determine that there are 5,000 men. That's impossible. So I don't know where that number even came from.
When you were reading that, I was thinking about the number as well. And in the story, at some point in the story, someone goes out and counts how many men are there. And I'm like, how long did it take them to do that? Because if you were just to sit and count to 5,000, that's a long time.
Yep.
And so what's the time lapse there before you go through this crowd of 20,000 people and count 5,000 men? So that's I can't think of the word right now, but the writer is obviously embellishing the numbers here, or just coming up with a number that they think sounds right.
Yeah.
Or in my interpretation, just make it up anyway.
Yeah, that's essentially what I think too. Oh man. Okay. Yeah. Are we talking about the miracles of Jesus next? Is that what we were gonna do, or?
Yeah, walking on water. That was the next miracle that we were going to talk about.
Okay. Let me find it, because I know there were a couple. Let's see. I have, like, in the children's Bible, they have like a couple of miracles all put together.
Okay.
Yeah, because like part of it was like him like calming the sea, and then I don't know if
calming the sea. Yeah, actually, it's the calming the sea. It's the one right after the feeding the 5,000 people.
Okay, let me see.
This is the one I want to talk about. because he's walking on water and he calms the sea.
Okay.
And then after that, we'll get into talking about what you can say to your kids about some of these miracles.
I'm trying to find it in the kids' Bible, so I'm really sorry. I'm having a hard time.
I can read it if you want.
Yeah, could you? That'd be great.
Okay. It's really short because on the website that I'm at, it's just a summary.
Oh, okay.
So after feeding the 5,000, Jesus sends his disciples ahead of him in a boat to cross the Sea of Galilee. Several hours later in the night, the disciples encounter a storm. Jesus comes to them walking on the water. This terrifies the disciples who think they are seeing a ghost. Jesus tells them in verse 27, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." Peter replies, "Lord, if it is you, tell me to come to you on the water." So Jesus invites Peter to come. Peter gets out of the boat and begins walking on the water toward Jesus. But when Peter takes his eyes off Jesus and sees the wind and the waves, he begins to sink. Peter cries out to the Lord, and Jesus immediately reaches out his hand and catches Peter. As they climb into the boat together, the storm ceases. Then the disciples worship Jesus, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God."
That is short. That's nice.
That was a short one. Yep. And I love the points of interest, the teaching lessons from this story, which is why I wanted to do this one. It says, Jesus sends the disciples away so he can get alone on the mountainside and pray. Even in his busy schedule, spending time with God is a priority for Jesus. Okay, and we don't have the King James version in front of us, so I'm not sure what Jesus was doing when he sent the disciples away, but I found that interesting. Another one is the disciples, even though they have spent much time with Jesus, do not recognize him in the storm. Sometimes we don't recognize the Lord when he comes to us in the middle of our storms. And that one I find interesting because I do have a couple of conservative Christian friends, and they talk about this a lot. It's like, I know Jesus is coming and he's going to help me through this problem, and I just need to pray and wait for him. And so I can see people like going to this story to kind of, especially if that's the lesson that was taught to them in their churches.
Right.
And then Peter doesn't begin to sink until he starts looking around the winds and the waves. Taking our eyes off Jesus and focusing on the difficult circumstances will cause us to get under our problems. But when we cry out to Jesus, he catches us by the hand and raises us above the seemingly impossible surroundings. So those are the interpretations of that story that typically get taught, which I find interesting.
Yes, I also saw, let's see. Yeah, Jesus knew exactly where they were the whole time. They were never out of his sight. They might have forgotten all his promises, but Jesus did not forget. We will never find ourselves anywhere the Lord cannot find us. That is comforting. There are no storms in life that Jesus cannot subdue in his time. Mm-hmm. And there is never a valid reason to fear nor be anxious. We are to trust in the one who will never leave us nor forsake us. That's what I saw. That was on a different website for it. So it's kind of the metaphorical interpretation.
Right. And it reminds me of kind of this attitude that I see Christians have, where I don't need to do anything to fix my problems because Jesus is going to fix them for me. And most people don't. Most people I know anyway don't. Even if they're Christians, they actually do try to fix their problems. But just this attitude that all I have to do is pray real hard and give my money to the church, and Jesus is going to fix my problem for me, and I don't have to do anything else. Right. And I find that disturbing in a lot of ways, because you should be helping yourself. And then also, and I've talked about this before with other people, not on this show though, you give credit away. When something good happens to you, you give credit to someone who didn't that doesn't exist but didn't do anything for you. I mean, you put in all the hard work, you deserve the credit.
Right.
So there's a lot of things about this attitude that Christians have that bother me.
Yeah.
That seem to kind of shine through in this story, in this particular story.
Yeah, I think God gets the credit a lot for even things that I think you don't even, like, you didn't even do yourself. Like, if you, like, gambling, we have an avid gambler in our family, and so it's like any time that she wins, she's like, oh my gosh, like, Jesus was looking out for me because my mortgage was due and I won just enough money to pay the mortgage. And I'm like, no, he wasn't looking out for you. Like, that's just random luck. You won at a casino. So could have been the hundreds that you put in before, and then maybe you finally brought enough in to pay your mortgage. But yeah, like, I just think that's funny. Like, God knew that I needed the money for the mortgage, and so he
God's
let me
hanging out
win
in
at
the
the
casino
casino.
for you.
Especially when I think that the Bible condemns gambling. I don't think you're supposed to gamble, as far as the Bible is concerned. I think that's what I heard.
I think so too. That sounds familiar to me, although I'm too lazy to go actually look that up. So maybe someone wants to look that up for me and post a comment. But I do believe that many Christians consider that a vice.
Yes.
Although I will tell you, many church groups in Michigan go on trips to the casinos, because we have a lot of Indian reservations and casinos,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll like charter a bus.
Oh,
So
wow.
it must be low on the list, of vices. So
Yeah, I see. GotQuestions.org says the Bible does not specifically condemn gambling, betting, or the lottery. The Bible does warn us, however, to stay away from the love of money and stay away from attempts to get rich quick.
Okay. So some people could maybe
not breaking the rules.
Yeah.
It says right there.
Loophole.
I know, exactly. So if you just need to pay your mortgage, just pray, go to the casino, and see what happens.
Good.
You could win 1 out of 100 times. You never know. Go ahead. No. Okay. I was going to tell you, I have I just enrolled my son in preschool, my second. It's going to be his first year in preschool, so we went to this open house, and I told you the neighborhood, the area we're in is very, there's a lot of theists. And so I was just talking to one of these other moms, and she said, well, I only have one, and I had her when I was 41, so, it's really different for me, and, blah, blah, blah. She's like, it's really hard. It's really hard to be this old and to have a toddler running around. And I'm like, oh, okay. And she's like, I was talking to my girlfriend, and this is what she said. She said, there's a reason that God gave us the ability to stay up all night in our 20s, and it's not to party, it's so that we can take care of children. We don't have that anymore in our 40s. And I was like, oh, okay, yep. That's perfect logic. I love it. Yep. That's great.
I find that interesting because I was way too immature in my 20s.
Yeah.
I could stay up all night, sure, but I was completely immature. There was just no way I wanted nothing to do with children in my 20s. So I couldn't. It's like, all right, yeah, you want to like go the biological aspect, that 20 is better as far as energy, and metabolism and things like that, sure, but maturity-wise, mentality, no.
Yeah. Well, and
not for me.
I was talking to Steve about it too, and I'm like, well, I think like during biblical times, the life expectancy was like less than half of what it is now. So I don't think a lot of women were having babies in their 20s as much as like their teens and late teens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's kind of just evolved with time. So.
Well, back in biblical times, when you're a girl and you have your period, you then became a woman and you were marriable because you were at that point you were able to conceive, and so I agree, and I do believe there's plenty of evidence to support that. 2,000, 3,000 years ago, it was very common for a 14, 15-year-old to have children.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty normal. In fact, even just like 1,000 years ago, if you were 20, 22, and you didn't have kids, you were an old maid. So it's really not that long ago that women started waiting until they were older to have children. So what I wanted to kind of make sure that we cover, because I think you and I, we kind of get lost and we just start talking and we forget to kind of bring it around to what can parents say to their kids when they start talking about these miracle stories. Any thoughts?
Well, if it were me, I would probably, I'm not a theist, so I think that it's all crap either way, but I think that I would say that a lot of people definitely talk about how a lot of people think that they may not have necessarily happened, and that maybe it's a metaphor for just believing and trusting in God. And certainly asking, I think one of the first things I would do is ask if they'd ever seen anything like that happen, if they think that it's possible for things like that to happen, and then kind of talk about the science or the logistics or the feasibility of some of those miracles actually happening, and what it would take for 5,000 or 15 to 20,000 people to eat a couple of loaves of bread and some fish. You know what I mean? Because that, if you think about it, the physics of it, it would just have to materialize. And so certainly talking about real life and how that would in no way reflects what we know about reality right now. I think that's where I would start.
Right,
just
yeah.
talking about, do these miracles, how could they have happened? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I agree with you. My approach has been similar. In that, well, first give them a good base in science and kind of talk about things that are possible and things that are not possible. And then I would even get into the supernatural. Actually, we are getting into the supernatural. The kids are really interested in it because they're watching Harry Potter, and people are talking about ghosts and vampires, and so we've had a lot of discussions about things that are supernatural, and then I tell them, well, those things aren't possible. No one's ever seen a vampire. Can a creature really live off of blood, of another creature? Is it possible to live forever? And so we kind of go through those things with them, things that people generally accept to be not true anyway. And so that's kind of been my approach. And then when you get into the miracles, they're already pretty skeptical of these miracles. And the other thing that I really wanted to make sure I got into, especially with the calming of the storm, is that only Jesus' disciples see the miracle, and with very few exceptions in a lot of these miracles, the people who witness the miracles are Jesus' followers. So you just don't see a lot of skepticism in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Except for, a guy like, I don't believe you can do that, and then he does something. Oh, you're the Son of God. I'm going to follow you now. and so no one walks away dissatisfied,
right? Never.
In this. And so I find that interesting as well. And that would be another thing that I would point out, is this kind of the biasness of the author.
I would love to hear some biblical skeptics, like their point of view, just like some sort of like secondary book that's like, okay, some of us saw right through this, and this didn't really happen, and this is how it actually happened. Like, we don't have that. We don't have any naysayers. And I think that's that is a huge problem, that we don't have. Like, we've got the witnesses to these miracles, but we don't have anybody on the opposing end, right, from that time who wrote a book right, that negates what the Bible says. So that's literally the only evidence we have, and I don't think that it's evidence. It's a book, as much as Harry Potter is evidence for magic being real. So
that's one of the main criticisms of the Bible. If you listen to Bible critics, they'll say, some of the things, like the feeding 5,000, which actually was 20,000 people. with the loaves and the fishes. The Bible is the only account of this happening. But you would think that out of those 20,000 people, someone else in a different book or a different parchment would have written about it, because that's pretty amazing. But no one else wrote about it. And so that just kind of is evidence to the historical inaccuracies, or the lack of the fact that it's not historical at all.
Right.
In my opinion, of the miracles of Jesus in the New Testament.
Yeah, but it's just funny because these days everything else has to be verified several times. Things have to be peer reviewed. People have to see it. And just for this one thing, or a lot of things, that's all people need is that one book, and that's fine. They don't question beyond that. And we have all these Bible scholars who are telling you how it's possible that these events happened historically. And I don't understand how that's even possible from one book when there's no other evidence indicating, whether or not it happened, or checking any of the facts. Especially when so many different parts of the Bible contradict each other as well. The different, I guess, are they authors when they say, like, Peter and John and Matthew? I don't know how that works.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I wasn't raised in church, so they're just guys to me. But I wanted to touch upon that because the different Gospels, because those are called the Gospels. I do know that much. They're very contradictory. So even with the resurrection of Jesus, which we're not going to get to today, if you look at the different accounts of the resurrection, there are major discrepancies between the stories, like how many people were there, who was there, and important people too, like people you would remember if they were there or not, like Mary, the mother of Jesus. Like, you would probably remember if she was there or not during the resurrection. And there are some accounts that say she was there, and some that say that she was not. And so the thing is, anytime you have an eyewitness account and you interview all the witnesses, the stories are all going to be slightly different, and we know this. There's going to be maybe who said what would be different. It's going to be summarized a little bit differently depending on the attitude that a person gives. The summary of what someone said would be given differently depending on the perspective of the person. Who did what, especially if it's something that happened very quickly, like a fight, for example. That those details might be skewed, but not who was there.
Yeah.
So little small discrepancies we would expect, that would be normal, but these are really major, and these are supposed eyewitness accounts with major discrepancy issues, which makes me think that they were just made up. And so that would be another thing that you could talk about with your children too, is just kind of, you could even do a game like the telephone game, or one thing that you could do is have your children, if you have more than one child, watch like a 30-second, 1-minute clip of a movie, and then each of them retell that clip, and have them notice how they all retell the clip a little bit differently, but also that all the major points are the same, and then go into those stories in the Bible where the major points are very different, and then talk about why that's a problem. So that's another approach, something you can do with your kids that I just thought of right now. So I'm on a roll.
Look at you! Yeah.
We have a lot of comments. Do you mind if we get to them, Amanda?
Not at all.
Am I cutting you off at all?
No, not at all.
Okay, so Steve asks, and I don't have an answer, but maybe you do. How does someone like me, an atheist, able to determine what is a metaphor and what is to be taken literally? And I think that's an interesting question, because I don't even think that's a question that Christians have been able to solve for themselves.
No, because
Thoughts?
everybody's interpretation of the Bible is a little bit different. Just like there's what we were talking about, a huge divide between whether people think it's literal or metaphorical. And so if everybody celebrates their faith differently, then you aren't going to be able to get a definitive answer of what's correct and what's incorrect. Because I think, like I was saying, I mean, I guess you could talk to, like I said, the biblical scholars about what's generally agreed upon, but when it comes down to it, the whole main idea is that you have to have faith and you have to believe. And when it comes to people's faith, it's a very personal thing, and it's not always something that they can explain. It's not always something that they want to explain. It's a lot of times people don't question it. So I think it's your question can't be answered, Steve. So thanks.
I think it's a good question though, and I'm glad that he asked it because I do want to point out that this is something that Christians they don't agree on. They don't agree on what stories are literal that literally happened and what stories are metaphorical. Um, so thank you. So as atheists, I don't know. I guess that we're just kind of going with what there's the most evidence for. Okay. The Bible is a book of claims, not evidence. Yep. And then, Steve, again, do you think this is just kind of a silly question, but it's relevant. Do you think that would fly with parents these days? And I want to add Christian parents these days, the virgin birth idea. Mom, I have to tell you something. I'm pregnant, and it's Jesus.
Yeah, I feel. Oh man, I would love to see that acted out. Like, I swear, it's Jesus. The angels haven't come to you yet to tell you? Oh, I thought they were going to tell you. It'll be in your dream. Over one of the next few days, they're going to come and tell you.
That's awesome. Oh crap, I'm losing power.
Uh-oh.
All right. Let's see. I think I can make it in the next 5 minutes. Let's see here. Oh, I've got 23 minutes. Whew, okay.
Battery power? Are you losing battery
I'm
power?
losing battery power, yes.
Oh, okay.
I can't have like an ideal technical setup. I have to have something go wrong. Okay. But yeah, I that would be so funny though. Like what you said. Just the angels are coming. Don't worry. They're gonna. You're gonna have it in a dream. I'm still a virgin. It's okay. But I do think there are, people that are just naive and especially poor, uneducated Christians that are being taken advantage of. I could definitely see that happening, where a girl and her family may be duped into thinking that this is a miracle that they're experiencing together. And I think I even saw something on the internet recently about a girl claiming to be pregnant and a virgin. And of course now with what's it called, in vitro fertilization.
Right.
Hey,
Yeah.
you technically you can be.
Yep. Definitely.
Okay. I don't think we have enough time to do the crucifixion.
Okay. That's okay.
Uh-oh. What happened? Are you there?
I'm here.
My screen just went blank. I can't see you.
Oh no! Well, I'm still here. Are you still there? Oh no, you're frozen for me. Oh man, I'm gonna start talking. I'm gonna run this show till you come back. I have some other miracles that Jesus did that we didn't get a chance to talk about that I think are really funny. The one turning water into wine, I think that's a crazy miracle because it's so random and unnecessary. Essentially, he was at a wedding and the wedding ran out of wine. This wedding feast ran out of wine, which evidently at that point in time, Jewish weddings, when they ran out of wine, that was like very embarrassing, humiliating for the bride and groom. That was a terrible thing to do. So they ran out of wine, and Jesus' mother Mary came and told him about the problem, and then she, I guess, had faith that he was going to take care of it, because I've seen other versions of the Bible saying he kind of like balked at it at first, like, why do I need to do this? But she's like, you need to do something about this wine. Come on, man. We don't want to make this a dull affair. So he tells the servants to fill some pots with water. And they're like, water? What? And he's like, yeah, water. Just do it. And then he told a servant to take from one large pot and let the man in charge of the feast taste it. And when the man tasted it, it was now wine. Good wine. The best wine. The servants were amazed because Jesus had turned water into wine. Only God could do such miracles. So now, this wedding was probably like the wedding of the year, because they got all this wine. And I want to note that it said good wine, the best wine, because Jesus would never give you anything less than the best wine. It's not going to be like your $5 bottle of Zinfandel, you
Hey,
guys. Oh God, are you back?
can you believe that? I did not have 23 minutes of power left.
Oh, that's cold. Okay, that was the problem. Well, we're talking about Jesus turning water into wine, if you heard me, and just how silly it is that that was one of the miracles that he performed, was just like going to a wedding and being like, hey guys, all right, ran out of wine. But also, if you think about it, it would be really nice to have that at a modern wedding where like just one of your guests, like, we're out of booze, hey, here you go. And it's not just any booze, it's the highest quality booze there is. You're welcome. Like,
That guy's
it's your wedding present.
Yeah. Man, of course you're going to want Jesus at your wedding if he's doing that.
I know. Everybody wants Jesus at their wedding. Oh, man.
So we didn't get to the crucifixion, and I'm sorry about that. I do want to mention, though, with the crucifixion, if you wanted to teach that story to your children, look up the death and rebirth of other gods, of other pagan gods. We covered that with our Easter episode, and I'll put a link to that, to the Easter episode, because we did talk about some of those other gods that died and were resurrected, some of whom, God, I want to say that there was at least one that died on a cross as well. I can't, maybe not, I'll have to look that up. So if you wanted to talk about the death and resurrection of Jesus, definitely researching some of those pagan gods and kind of putting those stories side by side is a great way to get your children thinking critically about some of these stories. Anything that we need to go over before I start talking about next week?
No, I don't think so. Definitely, like I said earlier, check out BibleForChildren.org, because it's a pretty comprehensive source of Bible stories in ways that kids can understand. So.
All right, and I'll put a link up to that too. And I think I did that last week, but I'll do it again.
Okay.
So in 2 weeks, we'll be back, and to kind of keep going with the children's stories or children's lessons, we are going to hit on some Hindu myths. And I said this earlier, one of the Hindu myths we will definitely cover is the myth of Krishna, who his story is very similar to the Jesus story, so we'll be making comparisons to that, and I'll get some links up for anyone who wants to kind of read ahead of the show. And hopefully, and then again, Amanda and I will brainstorm some ideas for ways you can kind of approach these topics of these stories with your children. And I believe that's it for tonight. Promotions.
Oh.
I do want to promote Be Secular. I don't do it every time the show airs, but I need to. They're a great organization. We interviewed Shannon and Mark Nebo from Be Secular about a month ago, and that was a great show, and they're doing some great things, and they're continuing to do great things. And if you buy something from them through the link on my website, a little bit of money gets kicked back to Godless Family, which is nice. So they're trying very hard to support many different secular organizations and artists through the purchasing of T-shirts and bracelets and things like that through their website. So I want to give a shout out to Be Secular. And then Amanda, anything you wanted to promote?
I did get, speaking of Be Secular, I did get a message on Facebook today from Mark. And he is asking us, well, not us, but people in general, to give a quick shout out to his podcast. He spoke about it briefly last time when they were on the show, called the Raw Men Podcast. And he just asked if we would give a little shout out to that because he's really excited about it. And from what I understand, he had Matt Dillahunty on there recently. Mm-hmm. So definitely check that out. RA_MEN podcast, or RA-MEN, not to be confused with the ramen noodle clean comedy podcast. Don't do that one. It's RA_MEN, not ramen. So
yeah, check that out. Yeah, that's Mark Nebo and Aaron Ra doing that together.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So check that out. I don't remember when it's on. I think it's Thursdays. I think it's on Thursdays.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they do theirs bi-weekly, and there's lots of links, so you can like their Facebook page or their Twitter account, and I'll try to get links up to that too, and check them out.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's it. Thanks, Amanda, and thanks everyone for bearing with me and still trying to deal with my computer issues. And we'll see everyone in 2 weeks, and we'll talk about Hindu myths. So, bye-bye.
Bye.